എൻ്റെ പൊന്നുമാൻസ്, ഹലോ ഗൈസ്, എവരിബഡീസ്. ഇന്ന് we are going to finish off this whole vision thing. So we will have a recap, okay? Generally recap, okay? The recap is that lots of types of there are a lot of photoreceptors, and photoreceptors are arranged into receptive fields, okay? And most receptive fields are center surround. Center and surround are differentially activated, and that's what actually produces these kind of results. So there are different kinds of things in which there are large receptive fields are there for bigger magnocellular to find the direction, and small receptive fields are there for parvocellular neurons. And you can understand why. So like parvocellular is parvo means small, magno means big. So ultimately the ganglion cells that get so much area of receptive field will be bigger ganglion cells, and that these are called M cells, which is called magno. And smaller areas, the ganglion cells that fire for smaller areas will have small cells, and they are called parvocellular, P cells, P kind of cells, okay? And they are all overlaid on top of each other. The yellow things are like big cells, and violet is actually small parvocellular kind of ganglions. I mean the receptive field for these ganglions. And you can see that here are the ganglion cells. There are huge ganglions, there are small ganglions, there are closely knit ganglions, lots of types of ganglions that carry lots of information. And this is a very interesting thing, showing the retinal tiling of different types of cells. All cells are represented in different fields. They even might share the same photoreceptors for that matter, okay? They can share photoreceptors, like as in one cone can be connected to different ganglion cells, and things like that are there, okay? And then using all that information, essentially what we are seeing is not an exact representation of what it is. At one point everything is processed. If you take this point, one cell is looking how bright it is, okay? I'll change the color. One cell is probably looking how bright it is. One cell will be looking is anything movement. One cell will be looking for movement in that area. Then one cell will be looking edge, and then one cell will be looking at the color. One ganglion cell, in the receptive field will be looking for color, and movement also sideways. All x, y, z, all movements are also calculated. So basically, if you take a small area of the visual field, everything is processed. Motion, edge, everything is processed in every specific area, okay? So retinal output is as that of parallel channels, and there are a lot of parallel channels, but the most essential 3 parallel channels are basically for edge detection. I told you first we draw the boundaries and then we put color, okay? So edge detection is one thing, then we put color in that, and to know whether the edge detection is what your eyes are moving, or there's an actual object's motion sensitivity is very important. That is how we see. Remember the video of the cat movie, okay? That is about it, okay? And edge detection is by like off center cells mainly, and there are on center cells also which has center surround receptive fields. So that is how they detect edges. The center and the surround are different. Color also, there is that center surround thing happening, and red and green opposes each other, the opponent's theory, okay? Red and green opposes each other, blue and yellow opposes each other, and color is mapped in this way. Luminosity, how yellow, how blue, and how green or how red. That is how we calculate. So that is where these opponent cells are coming, and I told you why all these things come. And object sensitivity also similar methodology, okay? So the retinal output is technically 3: edges, color, and object motion sensitivity. So how do we put these edges into a shape to identify things and act accordingly? That is what we are going to deal next. Okay, so the point is, as in with all the sensations, thalamus is the relay station. Everything goes there. Not much of processing happens in the thalamus. It is just like a relay station where everything is connected to, like, everything kind of thing. It goes, connects, and does a lot of things. Okay, so these are the, this is the like the total number of ganglion cells present. There are like 40-50 ganglion cells, and each cell giving responses like this to light. You can see all these responses, and this is what our brain sees. Okay, from all this information, the brain will actually create the image. So that is what we want to see. So thalamus, okay, I told thalamus, but essentially thalamus, which part are we talking about in case of vision? Yes, the lateral geniculate body. It's just like the lateral part of the thalamus, that's it. Okay, so the lateral geniculate body, and so essentially, yeah, there is a good picture. This is it. So just imagine that this is the person. Retina, from the retina, the tracks go to the thalamus lateral geniculate nucleus, and from the lateral geniculate nucleus it goes to the visual cortex. Okay, so that's how it goes. So the lateral geniculate nucleus, when you see, it's not exactly coming from the supply is not coming exactly from one retina only, one side retina only. Basically what happens is, just imagine that this is the lateral, just imagine that this is the lateral geniculate, this is the lateral geniculate nucleus. Okay, if you see that is the lateral geniculate nucleus, you can see that the right visual field falls on the left side of the left retina, and the left visual field falls on the right side of the visual retina. You can follow this because the left side is always marked red. So this is how it goes. The left and the right fields are going like this, but at the optic chiasma, actually all the fields converge to reach the lateral geniculate body. Like, the left field of vision, the whole of left field of vision will read the right geniculate body, and the whole of right field of vision will read the left geniculate body. Okay, so that is how it is generally connected. That much I guess it's being taught already. So, and then this is the interesting part. Okay, when we cut the part of the thalamus at the lateral geniculate body, you can see that it has got marcations like this. It's kept in layers, and the layers like this is called lamina. And if you closely examine these layers, this is the microscopic picture of the layer. Okay, when you see these layers, you can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers. So you can see that there are 6 layers. Okay, so then we had to find out which layer is representing which, or why is there a separation and things like that. In fact, later on it was even found out that in between the layers there is a small another layer is there. Okay, that is there. Okay, you can see that there are layers in between this also. Okay, and that is what we have found out. And then we took the electrodes and started poking around and get shining light into the eye and poking around with the electrodes in all these areas to find out what is representing what, and what is which nucleus is doing which. So we found out that, and the interesting part is this. Okay, the point is, when you see those laminations which I showed you earlier, okay, the layers 1, 4, 6 represent the contralateral eye, and the ipsilateral layers are represented in 2, 3, 5. And it varies also. The easiest way to think about it is, actually you should you should just write, 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, these are the layers. I'm just making up a column. Okay, so the most important things are generally, okay, the very important cells. I'm just making this up so that you can remember easily. Okay, the most important thing, that is like the big cells will come and reach 1 and 2. So these are these are called, because I told you the ganglion cells, there are big ganglion cells that carry object motion sensitive information, and there are small ganglion cells that take information only from a small receptive field, so that accuracy can be improved. Because a large visual area means it might be wrong, the accuracy is not there. If you are like representing each small area by each ganglion cell, the accuracy is more. Just like you can have more quality if you increase the megapixels in the camera. Okay, so something like that. So these cells will be small, and ganglion cells that take a receptive field of a large area are usually motion detection, and also large edge detection is also there. So magnocellular pathway. Okay, so these are supported by M cells, magnocellular, which means 1 and 2 are magnocellular. Okay, that is for sure. And 3 4 5 6 are for parvocellular. Parvocellular means the ganglion cells that supply the area here is actually very small. Why? Because parvocellular looks for accuracy and visual acuity, details, and the quality of all these things. Okay, so that is represented in 3 4 5 6. So now the problem comes, how do you check for the we told the lateral geniculate body receives supply from this as well as the opposite side medially. It's like this. So the left lateral geniculate body technically receives from the left geniculate body represents the right field of vision. Okay, so you need to actually get ipsilateral as well as contralateral supply to this lateral geniculate body. So okay, so what are the cells that are ipsilateral? What are the areas of contralaterality? So the idea is very the easy way to remember is magnocellular. M is actually magnanimous. So the first it will give to contralateral side, and the second it will give to ipsilateral side. So the same side it will wait for a little while. It is magnanimous. So it will first accept the opposite side. Come sit here. Very magnanimous. So the contralateral side is 1 and the ipsilateral side is 2. But parvocellular is parvo, small. So they are not very magnanimous. So first they will take their place. So 3 starts with ipsilateral. Then you can alternate ipsilateral, contralateral, ipsilateral and contralateral. Okay, so that is how it does. So this is called the lamination. So you can see that in the lateral geniculate here, it's a beautiful this is the thing to know. So that is it. So you can see all these things, and you can see that everything has got an ipsilateral and a contralateral representation. See, the magnocellular is ipsilateral and contralateral. The parvocellular has 2 ipsilateral and contralateral representations, and we will talk about it. And I told you about this a layer in between, right? This layer, this pink thing that is being shown, which I am starting to color the yellow. But yeah, the pink thing in the middle, this thing. Okay, this actually gets supply from not P-type and M-type cells. There are other kinds of cells there. So what did we call them? Non-M, non-P-type cells. So that's pretty simple. And this is called coniocellular pathway. So essentially there are 3 pathways that are running. magnocellular for the border edge detection and a lot of movement things, parvocellular for detail, and then coniocellular is also there. So what does coniocellular do? Coniocellular actually gives color. Color information is being carried a lot by a coniocellular pathway, and it is always sandwiched here. See, it is sandwiched in between all these layers so that it can give colors to all the layers. And so the fact is that in the thalamus you can see that separation, and in that separation also you can see that there is ipsilateral and contralateral for everything except for color. Color is like a mixture, and that comes via coniocellular pathway. So that is about the ganglions. And why would there be a lateral geniculate body? And I mean, what are the uses and what are the things? See, there are a lot of reflexes that happen at this level. Lateral geniculate body, you can remember the what are the reflexes? The pupillary reflex, consensual light reflex, and all these things, you know, it starts from the lateral geniculate body. It's just like the part of the spinal cord where the stretch reflexes start or something like that. Okay, just imagine it like that. First relay center, and then the frontal eye field is to move your eyes. Just imagine if you are looking straight and then suddenly there is a fly on the right side, you will start looking like this. Your eyes will move because your frontal eye field motor movement should be, you know, it's a motor. Your oculomotor and other nerves, 3, 4, 6 nerves should actually change the position of the eye to track that object, right? So for tracking and all, there are connections from these lateral geniculate body to the frontal eye field, and it can give connections to the pupil. I told the pupillary reflexes, and even the neck reflexes. The neck reflexes are very closely, it goes to the pretectal area to control the neck movement, because obviously when the neck moves the vision changes, so there has to be some connection. And all these interconnections and, you know, switching on relay station, you know, where this is connected to that, where neck is connected to the frontal eye field, so that whenever we move our neck also we can see the same place. So all these connections and interconnections are done at the lateral geniculate body, which is just like any part of the thalamus, acts like a relay station. Okay, this is how the thalamus acts as a relay station. All the impulses come here, then we can divide it into reflexes, what all to be controlled, how to connect each other and things like that. So that is the lateral geniculate body. So we got connected everything, we know the connection, and from the lateral geniculate body it goes to the cortex. Okay, so cortex so the cortex gets edges, color, motion. Okay, edges, color and motion essentially. Okay, so, and these are not really extremely closely connected, as in all these things, there is a relationship to all these things, as in if this eye is there, and this is the left field, this is the, you know, left field of vision, and this is the eye. If it's the left field of vision, let's just trace it. The back of the retina, what is going to happen? It is going to fall in the nasal field, and this is going to fall in the lateral field, and the lateral field doesn't cross, it goes like this. The nasal field does cross at the optic chiasma, comes like this. Similarly here, and this is the lateral geniculate body. Okay, so whatever is represented in this part is represented accurately in lateral geniculate body. And similarly, when these fibers from the lateral geniculate body start moving to the cortex here, this cortex also has got similar representation, as in each part of the cortex that is close by represent close by fields in the retina. Like if this part is sensing the field here, this part will be sensing the field nearby. So with that we can actually form small images in the cortex and join them together to create a bigger image. Okay, so that is what is happening. So see, so how it is coming, edges and motion are coming via the magnocellular pathway mainly. Okay, mainly, and paracellular is also taken, but edges and borders are coming mainly through the magnocellular pathway, and motion is also used to detect the differences. Remember the cat thing. Okay, the cat starts moving around. The videos I have linked earlier. Okay, and these things move around, we can understand the borders, and when we understand these borders, and this comes from the magnocellular and things. Okay, and from the big cells it will go to the lateral geniculate body in 1 and 2 areas we told. Okay, and from 1 and 2 areas it will come to the cortex. Okay, for recognizing shapes and things like that. Okay, and color comes through parvo. Parvo is generally for all details, general color sensing alla, generally for details. Parvocellular and we told one coniocellular, coniocellular pathway. From that lateral geniculate body it will come by coniocellular pathway, and actually it will put colors inside the borders. So edges are formed from the magno, and the parvo is in. Okay, and then color is processed, and then color is put by the coniocellular pathway, and then if you are focused really, and there are a lot of small cells that supply this particular area, like when we focus on the macula, if you are focusing on the macula, you can even see very small details, like maybe there is a if it is a thatched roof or something like that, we can see small details into this, all the details, the textures and all these things you can see, and that comes entirely from the parvocellular pathway. Okay, so this is how we start processing. Now before starting anything, see, just imagine, this is called a cortical column. Okay, we can discuss about it in detail later. Okay, this is a cortical module. Like this is a small cross sectional area, like you can see the cortex layers, layer 6, layer 4, layer 5, layer 4, 3 and 2, like we talked about in the cortex. 6 is the thing that supplies down the output from the cortex. Everything enters from the thalamus in the layer 4, and all the processing happens at the top, and after the processing is done, it comes and relays to the bottom 6th layer, and it comes out. So that is how everything is done in the cortex, every single thing. Okay, in vision we'll talk in detail. And what happens is, this cortical area kind of represents the part of the area that we see. Okay, and close by areas, that is, if we are looking at a window, the close by areas are represented in close by cortical modules. Like if you are okay, just look at this finger. Okay, the cortical module that processes this area will be close to the cortical module that processes this area, and this will be the cortical module that processes this area will be close to the next, and everything is represented retinoptically. It is called retinoptic representation. So if this is the visual field, it is represented as cortical modules like this, and our brain starts processing what is happening in all these areas. So how this cortical modules process is the next step. Okay, this is about the inputs to the visual cortex, and how how the cortical module is structured. Okay, that is what we have to know. And we tried one thing. We took a very shining torch, or even in this case the first experiment was we added radioactive things in the eye. Whatever happens, if you shine a light, right now we can demonstrate easily by shining a light into one eye, and if you see, you will see that in the layer 4 means layer 4 of the cortex is where all the things that come to the cortex reach from the thalamus. It always synapses in layer 4. And when we looked at the layer 4, we saw that if the right eye is full of light, one part is completely activated. This is activated. This was actually found out by using functional MRI and all. There's like this, and this is activated. Okay, and then when the other eye was actually activated, we found that this is getting activated, the surround things are getting activated, and these blue things that got activated when the other eye was activated became still. So what do you mean by that? It means that even in the cortex, there is, at the layer 4 level, there is bilateral representation. Bilateral representation is not a small thing, in the sense that it is even close by. It is very close by. You can see that. Okay, so the areas supplied by similar fields in both eyes are very close to each other. So they are coming together. The same field is coming together. Left and the right of the same single field is coming together for a synapse at the layer 4 of the visual cortex. Okay, that much we have understood. And then later on, this is some deep thing. If you want to think about it, you can think about it, but it is pretty simple. Okay, let's not take this. This is okay. Let us take all this as layer 4 for our ease of use. Okay, and we don't need to know what the beta alpha is. Just take layer 4. Okay, if this layer 4 is there, ipsilateral, contralateral, parvocellular pathways come and fall on both areas. Left and right are present. See, the ipsilateral coming and reaching one area, the contralateral from both areas coming and reaching the corresponding right areas. And this is what, when we take the if we cut this and see, you will see that one area is lit and the other area is not lit. If you shine light into the right eye, maybe this will be lit and this won't be lit. So this shows that there is bilateral representation. And ocular dominance column, this is a representation of the ocular dominance column that we drew here. Okay, so that it is easier to remember. Okay, so that is how it is. Basically, left and right are represented in 4. Both magnocellular pathway, left and right, are here. Parvocellular pathway also, left and right, are here. Okay, you don't need to know the details of 4 alpha, 4c, beta. Just remember just remember that layer 4 gets supply from left and right, magno as well as parvo. Both are present in left and right areas, and it is all there. It is just like it is in the thalamus. It is just connected to this part, area 4. And from that area 4, actually both of them coalesce and connect to each other to do the calculations. And what are the calculations that it does? So this is what it is. The calculations is we got the edges, but how do we perceive the edges is we have to know, because we remember in the surround center field it is like this, and there can be edges like this, there can be edges like this, and there could be edges like this. It could be anything. It could be a vertical edge, it could be a horizontal edge, it could be a slanting edge, and there are a lot of kinds of edges that could come. And But the problem is we don't know what the edge looks like. Okay, and the fact is that the output is very interesting in the sense, this is the receptive field for ganglion cells. Okay, ganglion cells, all these ganglion cells. But just imagine all these three things. Okay, just imagine this thing. Okay, three ganglion cells. Okay, and there is an edge here, and this is the center field, this is the center field, this is the center field. Okay, and it is all dark here, and there is an edge here, and that falls on the receptive field, and each of these is connected to a ganglion cell. Here the ganglion cell, and each of these ganglion cells are closely knit to the lateral geniculate body, and from there actually these three ganglion cells will remain close by like this, the supply of these ganglion cells. Okay, and then we will look at this. If these three cells show edge, we can say that if three cells are positive, it means that these close by cells have an edge. So we will make a suggestion like, okay, there is an edge here, there is an edge here, and there is an edge here, and okay, so that is it. So three edges together, that is what we find. If three are there, we can understand that there is an edge here. So we can make a whole line up like that. Just imagine another case, that if it is like this, and by some case, okay, by some case there is another edge like this, what is going to happen? Still the image result will be something like the same, because these three things are connected. So there are a lot of error correction will be there. Small photoreceptors are arranged in close by cells. Just imagine that photoreceptors can respond even a single photon of light. What happens is, if a random photoreceptor starts firing just because of the heat or something like that, it can start firing. But because it is connected like this, all the errors can be corrected. If three cells which are close by, there are edges, it can detect, and that is what a cortical column does. Okay, so you can detect it, and now you can see that orientation is there. See, all directions are there. So what are these orientation columns? This is the next question. What do you mean by orientation columns? Orientation columns means, I guess, just imagine this. Okay, if this cell is there is an edge here, there is an edge here, there is an edge here. Okay, if these three cells are positive, then we will make a small line like this, and we will make, okay, this is the primary line, this is all microscopic. Okay, this is a line that we have. Okay, this is like another matrix. Okay, just imagine these cells are here. Okay, and another set of cells are here. These are all ganglion cells that are reaching the cortex layer 4. Okay, just imagine this is positive. Okay, this is not positive, this is negative, this is negative, this is not working, this is not positive, this is not positive, but this is actually positive, and this is also positive. All the other things are showing that there are no borders. So what does that mean? There is a line like this, and the orientation can be fixed. Okay, so if cells in the straight, arranged in the specific way is actually stimulated. Okay, If cells arranged in an orientation is actually stimulated together, it will show that it is this orientation. If cells in different orientation are stimulated, okay, it's not physically like this, mathematically using the neural complex. Remember that machine learning thing I showed you. Okay, if it is showing all these cells on the sides as connected, it will show this orientation. And similarly, if you look at this, it is created in such a way that this is the one, this whole thing calculates one single field. Okay, so in that field we are calculating, if this is the orientation, this cell will fire down. If this is the orientation, this cell will fire down. So actually we will get an output of we will get an output of small lines like this. Is it a small vertical line? Is it a small side line? Is it a slanting line? And you can get the exact angle. Now you can imagine how you can create these edges. See, one edge, another edge, another edge, another edge. This orientation columns will show it like this. Then there is a vertical column, vertical column, vertical column. Then there is a horizontal column, again vertical columns. And then you create a house. I don't know, this is a house. Is this a house? I guess this is a house. Okay, so you can create like this. So these are very small things, and this happens in this area, orientation columns. Okay, so this is what this does. And you remember the coniocellular pathway, right? That coniocellular pathway in between all this lamina. Okay, in between all these lamina, similarly, you can see that there are areas which are very much thickened. We just found out that this area is rich in cytochrome oxidase, and when we stain using these enzymes, you will see that there is a dark area like this. And we have found out that this area is this area actually calculates color. Okay, calculates color and decides the color for this whole area. Okay, so that is the idea of blobs. Okay, so now in the primary visual cortex, what did we got? Edges. Then again what did we get? We got blobs. Okay, we got blobs. So that is about it. Then we need details, right? We need details. So we need details. How do we get details? Details is by parvocellular pathway. Okay, parvocellular pathway. Same way, extra processing also happens in different areas, but it represents smaller fields. In fact, one cortical module in the periphery will represent this much area. Okay, probably. And one big cortical module will represent a small area if the representation is from the macula. Okay, so same amount of processing is applied for smaller fields, then that will create details. Okay, so that is how we do it. And this is an example of the stimulus orientation selectivity cells. Go see the videos. Okay, so the idea is that this group of cells fire only if the orientation is in this direction. You can see when we change the orientation, and when it is extremely opposite, when it is this direction or when it is vertical or something, the firing goes down very rapidly. But if we move a light in this direction, it will start firing. What does that show? It shows it is just an experimentation for the orientation columns. Orientation columns. What is this? Orientation columns. Okay, so you can see this is called a simple cell. Okay, so this will respond to movement in specific orientation only. It will detect lines, in a specific orientation. It'll defect. If this cell will respond only to movement in this direction, another cell will respond to movement in this direction. Just like we told in that cortical column, we have orientation selectivity, the same thing. So this is called a simple cell. Now we got only edges. Okay, we got only edges. So these simple cells will calculate these edges. So just imagine ganglion cells like this. Okay, these are all ganglion cells. So this is called a simple cell. 3 cells. If these 3 are positive, it is one single line. If these 3 are positive, we will get another line. If these 3 are positive, we will. If these three are positive, we will get another line. Okay. And this is it's about, this is not a technical line. Another ganglion cell will be stimulated. Okay. That suggests line. If these 3 cells totally fire together, then we will understand that it is a big border. Okay. Now we can start thinking about how we can combine a lot of simple cells with different orientation selectivity to create a shape. So maybe small cells are present like this, and all these things will be joined to form a big line. Then there are another small cells like this, and they all will be joined to form another line. And you can start creating a picture like this. Small lines are there, this all are connected, and you get the borders. Okay, like that. And now another thing is there. Complex cells can do much more. Like complex cells, the idea is that these are small simple cells, these are larger simple cells. Complex cells means they respond to specific shapes. Some cells respond to triangles. That means if there are 3 lines like this and these are all joined together, then it will start activating a cell which activates only for triangles. So you can make, when it goes to the complex cells, we can add shapes. There's a triangle like this, there's a square below, and there is a small rectangle here. So this will be the output of the complex cells. What is the output of the simple cells? Small line here, small line here. Sometimes this orientation might be different. It could be like this. And this is the output of the simple cell. Simple cell, when it goes to complex cell, it will give this nice output which can be used to differentiate. And then we know in the blobs will calculate and start putting color in these areas. Okay, green roof and a yellow bottom. Okay, now you can start seeing color, but still it is just a representation. Okay, now we need a lot of things. We can identify people, we can identify faces, we can move our head in accordance to what we see and things like that. So how do we go about doing this? That is what happens in the later areas. So this is what happens in V1. In the next area, what we do is, so V1 will give color and shape. Okay, and if we want details, the parvocellular cells will actually process each separate edge separately, and we will add details like this. There will be shading because of the rain shadow, the shadows, and there will be some amount of highlights, and there will be difference in color because of the edges and things like that. All these details will be added on, and this all happens starting from the single cortical module unit. That one module connects to like 5 okay, it's called positive feedback, like small cells connect to cortical modules, a lot of things connect to cortical modules, a lot of cortical modules connect to bigger cortical modules, and these bigger cortical modules join to form even bigger cortical modules, and then we create the shape bit by bit. Okay, so this is how it is connected. Hierarchical processing, that is what it means. Okay, like small cells, there are a lot of small cells in the ganglion, and lateral geniculate bodies come and fire on the cortex. Lot of things are connected to one cortical module, left and right areas, and this will process small lines like this, and different shapes and sizes and all that, and colors also there. Then we add all these things into the second layer to create a huge bigger line, and then these two are calculated to form different shapes, and therefore it is created hierarchically. Okay, this is called hierarchical processing. Now that is the function of V1. Now V2 is actually linked with very interesting things. This we do a lot of calculation without even knowing, without even it being true. This is an example. Okay, you can see that even though you are sure that there is no triangle there, you can actually see a triangle there, right? Yes, I'm not telling that this okay, where is this? Okay, this triangle is what I'm talking about, this central triangle, inverted triangle kind of thing. Okay, that you can kind of see, and but it is not real, it is not there. So all these calculations and things is done by V2s, because we need that, so that we understand a lot of things. So V2 does a lot of processing like that on top of what we already have in V1, and V3 does a little of color processing and things like that, and it's kind of a relay center thing. From V3 it can go to two areas. Okay, if this is the brain and this is the temporal area, and like this goes to the dorsal area and this goes to the ventral area. Okay, from V3 ventral area will reach here, it can go deeper and deeper into the temporal lobe, and this temporal lobe, this hierarchical processing goes so deep that in the end we can identify people. As in you if it is me, if you know me, when you see all these features, even if I am turning this side or this side, or looking up or looking down, or I am far away from this whole camera center, or even if I am very close by, still kind of you get an idea of who it is. And this is actually happening in temporal lobe. This is calculated in the temporal lobe using all the edges from V1, calculation from V2, and processing from V3, and so temporal lobe does a lot of work. It does object recognition, face recognition, and etc. In fact, people who have got really, Jennifer Aniston neuron has been found out, because anywhere in the visual field, if Jennifer Aniston's photo is shown, it's been found that the test was done on a fan of Jennifer Aniston. They found a particular neuron for Jennifer Aniston that kept on firing whenever and however Jennifer Aniston was shown. So that is also there. And what about the dorsomedial part? This is for usual reflexes for motion. So it has to go here, right? It will go to the reflexes, and it will start to process motion and things like that. Maybe if you are playing a game and you want to hit a goal, you need to calculate how fast you need to hit the ball to get it into the goalie post. So all these calculation needs to be done to modulate motor activity. We are not identifying the distance using our temporal lobe. We are making a general guess, and our magnocellular pathway is giving impulses via this dorsal pathway so that the accurate motor activity is done. We don't need to know how much, like, we don't want to know if it is just 4 meters apart and the height is 3 meters up. We don't need to know that. We can make an assessment by looking at the goalie post and we can make a hit. That is done using dorsal pathway. Dorsal pathway alla, dorsomedial pathway ennaanu it's said like that. So all this is not very important for the exam point of view, but I am just telling you because I think it is interesting. Maybe you should think it is interesting also. So essentially, small dots are joined in the V1. Symbol cells are joining very small dots, and these symbol cells join to form a little more complex cells, and both of this happens in V1. V2 does a lot of other calculations to show what is not there and what could be there and things like that. And then it goes to V3. It's like a relay center which does a little color processing. From V3 it can go in the dorsal pathway, dorsal medial pathway, and the ventrolateral pathway. This goes to the temporal lobe. This goes to the top part. It even gives connections to a lot of places. So this carries information about motion, calculation of distance, and a lot of other things. This pathway is about identifying. So this is like for motor this pathway is for like motor activity, and this part is for sensory identification. Okay, you can identify pencils, you can identify faces, you can identify objects, you can identify knife, gun, all these things. So this happens here, and here it is for motion action, hitting a ball into the goalie post without even calculating what the distance is. You can just do it like that. Okay, so this is how we solve vision. Okay, so now this is a very interesting example. You can just look at this picture, and you can see that this will happen because these lines are actually not as it seems. You just go look at this illusion of long and short person and how it is created. Then we will understand what and how weird our vision is, how easily we can be fooled, or how fast we can understand using our special mechanisms. But in doing so, we might lose accuracy just a little bit. So all these things we can ponder about and think. So just a recap: from the retina, M-type ganglion cells, P-type ganglion cells are there. Then non-M, non-P, that we told. Not M and not P, that is all. This is okay. So M-type will go to the magnocellular area of the lateral geniculate nucleus, that is 1 and 2 areas. Parvocellular will go to and the P-type cells will relate to the parvocellular neurons in the lateral geniculate nucleus 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and coniocellular non-M, non-P cells will be in between parvo and magno, and this is about color. Okay, all these cells relay in the layer 4 cells. Okay, layer 4 cells. Color doesn't relay on layer 4, it directly goes because it does not have bilateral representation. So color goes directly, it is not bilateral. But all the other relays in the layer 4, and it has bilateral and ocular dominance is there. Left and right is there in the layer 4, and then it goes to the cortex layer 2, and maybe even 4 and 3 and a lot of things where orientation and perception of motion, lines and edges are detected, and then color is put by the blob pathway, and if you want details, the parvocellular pathway takes it, and that is how it is. So yeah, here it is written magnocellular pathway use. You can just take a note if you really want. I told all the things. Parocellular pathway, same thing. This is about texture and details. And then the blob pathway, starting from the non-M non-P cells, coniocellular, in the end perception of color. And this is how it is. So first orientation, so small edges are created and complex edges are created, and complex edges are joined to form larger complex cells are joined. There are complex cells, and if there are other things like which you can, we can't see but it is important, like a small gap here, you will know that it will get connected here. Okay, so that is done by V2. And then in V1 there is also color. And detail, and details are also there. And V3 is a relay station, does just a little more color calculation. Why do you need that kind of color calculation? So the point is, the people who try to draw, okay, will probably understand, who have tried drawing. If you look into my face, if the light falls this place, okay, when I ask you what is this color, you will definitely tell it is brown. You can tell the color brown even in different kinds of illumination. But the people who draw, and if you draw brown, you will never get the 3D effect. Here you should draw white. See, this is white, but you will never tell it is white. You will identify it as brown because that is more useful to you. Okay, so this is called color constancy. If a yellow light comes and hit my head, and there is yellow light coming out of here also, our brain will calculate it as brown, because we know that this is in the same border. We have calculated it. We have the borders, and then we put color. So we kind of make colors constant. So this is called color constancy. There has been a big fight regarding this with blue and yellow. Gold, is it golden or is it blue? There was a dress, and I think it was a big thing in the internet. It is a great sensational thing, because people start telling that it is a golden color dress. I don't know, have you seen that golden color dress? Go check. I'll try to put that golden color dress in the video also. So golden or blue, that there was this big fight. Why golden and blue can be confusing, because gold and yellow and blue are like opponents. It is either blue or yellow. So in that area also it has got a problem. And then there is also color constancy, and the luminance, the light falling is also slightly yellow. So then the brain does mental gymnastics to find out what the color is, and then we get all confused, and people still can't agree on what color it is. Okay, so that is the thing that happens in V3 and V4 also. Okay, V4 is mostly for color constancy and things like that. That's why color is a complicated thing. It is just made up. Okay, so that is what is happening in V3 and V4. V3 is generally a relay station. Okay, then it goes dorsally for motor actions, and ventrally for sensory identification functions. What is the object that you see? Who is the object? Who is the person that is in front of you, and all these things. And if you see one more thing, it is close to the temporal lobe, and because it is close to the temporal lobe, it can actually activate emotions very close by, because the limbic system is close by. We will take about limbic system later, and hence we can have emotions while seeing something. If you see a beautiful sunset, you will feel very happy. If you see different things, you can feel different things, and your imagination will also change. Some people will like black cross, some people will hate black cross, and a lot of things can happen. So all vision can cause emotions using this pathway also. So the limbic system is close by the identification thing. Okay, if you did not understand, we can talk about that in limbic system. Anyways, we created edges, we put color in it, we made color constant. All the things that needed to be done for motor activity went through the dorsal pathway, and the identification happened in the temporal lobe. And I think we have solved vision basically. Again, you can go into details if you want to go deeply. There are a lot of stuff in the internet. MIT vision, solving vision, engineering, machine learning things. Lot of stuff. A lot of the stuff is happening in the vision field because we need automated cars, automatic driving cars. So we need to solve vision. So lot of studies are going on. Very exciting field. So that's it. Enjoy. Bye.
Your eyes, put them here at the center and keep them still for as long as you can, let's say for half a minute. Don't move them. These things work best. These After Effects works best because they're location dependent. If you really can keep your eyes very stationary, fixed on that spot. And keep your eyes fixed. And you all see the American flag? It's quite powerful. And it's very interesting. If you do this again, if you look now the second again, just fixate, keep your eyes still, you see A, takes some time for the after image to be created, and then B, it waxes in wanes. It's in ways we still don't fully understand. So first you see a strong after effect, then goes away, it comes back weaker and goes away. Sometimes you can see up to 3 of these waves appearing and disappearing. And now I'll show you my favorite all-time best ever top on my top 10 list of visual illusions, the Lilac Chaser. This is beautiful. It's awesome because after a while you see what's not there and you don't see what's there. So just fixate the cause here. Don't move your eyes. And tell me what you see. It's quite new discovery. So if you just sort of move your eyes over it, what you see are 11 purple discs, right? There's one always missing, and this travels, the whole is traveling around. And after a while, you will not see the existing disc anymore, you will only see the whole, but in fact you'll see the whole as an after image, as green, right? The after image to this sort of magenta is green. So after a while, and most of you should see that, if you keep your eyes steady at the center, you'll only see a single disc, right? Now the single disc doesn't exist. The color doesn't exist either. It's all a construct of your brain. The only thing that exists are 11 magenta balls that you don't see. It's amazing, our visual system. I mean, it's amazing that you can navigate through the world. Who will build something like this?